Hello class, welcome to today's segment whereby we shall be discussing the criteria used in marking of IELTS writing test. We'll also discuss the planning a candidate requires to do before writing their IELTS writing test. So let us begin with the criteria used for marking. Number one, the examiner gauges the task achievement stroke task response of the candidate. This is whereby the examiner gauges if the candidate's writing is within the context of the question asked. The answer given by the candidate within context. Does it answer the question asked by the examiner? For example, if the examiner asked about trees, has the candidate talked about trees, or has the candidate been swayed away and talked about maybe papers, talked about clothes? So number one, the examiner gauges if your answer is within the context of the question asked. Okay. The examiner also gauges a candidate's lexical resource. This basically means the vocabulary used in the writing. So guys, the vocabulary you've used in writing is also keenly gauged. Vocabulary means, have you used things like idioms, synonyms, connectors, have you paraphrased your wordings? Have you explained them well? Vocabulary. For example, if you're talking about a book, have you called it a book all through, or have you used a synonym of a book? For example, you're talking about a woman. Have you used the name woman all through, or you've used different vocabulary to talk about the same thing? E.g., you've said she's a woman. In another statement, you've called her a lady. In another statement, you've called her okay, woman and girl are not really interchangeable, but woman, lady, Have you expanded your vocabulary? The examiner also gauges this. Number 3, the examiner gauges your grammatical range and accuracy. Accuracy meaning, have you used the correct spelling? Have you used the correct tenses? Because you can be writing the correct thing, but your spelling is wrong. Your tenses are also wrong. Instead of saying had, you've used the word have. See, that is the wrong tense. So the examiner also gauges your tenses and spellings. Okay. Other than that, the examiner gauges your coherence and cohesion. This basically means your use of connecting sentences and connecting words to ensure that a statement makes sense. So the examiner gauges if your paragraphs make sense. For example, in one paragraph, have you talked about things that are totally unrelated? If you talk about things that are totally unrelated in one paragraph, then your score is going to lower automatically. So ensure that if in one paragraph you're talking about maybe a certain song, this is just an example, talk about that song in that paragraph, and then in the next paragraph you can talk about another song. Don't be mixing, like in one statement you've been talking about maybe a certain book. For example, a book called Stay With Me. So you say, this is the example I'm going to give. So you say, Stay With Me is a very good book. But in your next statement, you've already talked about, last year, while I was reading The River in Between was also marvelous. Like, what are you really talking about? So let your paragraphs have flow and let them be connected. Like, ensure that your statements are well connected. So I'm going to repeat. The examiner marks your task response. They also mark the vocabulary used. They also mark the accuracy of your words. They also mark the use of connecting sentences and words. So those are the 4 criteria used in marking in IELTS writing, regardless of whether it's part 1 or part 2. Okay, so let us go to the planning method required in IELTS writing. Guys, as I said, IELTS is all about strategy and practice. So the right strategy to use in writing module or writing test is always plan before writing. Planning is key in writing. Always don't just read a question and then begin writing immediately. Always plan. Okay, so number 1, plan what you're going to write about. This is whereby you've read your question statement, and then before doing anything else, please form thoughts in your mind, like what does this statement mean? Like, what does the examiner require of me? After that, after thinking of what the question is asking you, organize your points. So 1, you've read your statement, you've thought about the required answer. After that, write down your required points in paragraph form. Say, for example, you say paragraph 1, I'm going to be talking about advantages of public transport. Paragraph 2, I'm going to talk about disadvantage of public transport. And then you write some advantages of public transport. You just write them down in your rough paper. You write them down. You write just short form. You write something like reduces traffic, reduces emission of carbon dioxide, something like that, something very short. You're just organizing your points. Remember that. Okay, after organizing your points, then you can go to writing. So while you are writing, you'll just be referring to the short points you've written down. After that, you're going to evaluate your writing and also revise your writing. This is the point I was talking about, whereby you should preserve at least 5 to 7 minutes to go through your work, so that you ensure that you have the correct tenses, your spelling is right, your flow of words is right. And the planning and organizing comes within the first 5 minutes of writing. So as I had said previously, before you write, you should reserve at least 3 to 5 minutes to write your key points down, and then also preserve the last 5 to 7 minutes of revising your work. So always remember that. So what are you required to do? You're required to plan, organize, then write, then evaluate, then revise your work. So that is the requirement for you to excel in IELTS writing. And always use this method no matter what. Okay guys, we've come to the end of this segment, and our next segments are going to be about discussing each part of IELTS writing. Okay guys, see you in our next class, and bye.